So I'm here with James McArdle in his lovely dressing room at the Old Vic. Thank you for inviting me into your
very welcome
paradise. I'm very struck by the fact that you've got a huge picture of Nancy Pelosi on the door.
Yes. Yeah.
Why?
Well, I just adore Nancy Pelosi, and there's tradition everyone must kiss her before we go on stage. And
do you make everybody do
I don't
this?
make everyone do it, though. Yeah, and I just love her. But I think she is one of the most effective politicians of our time, and has been one of the in the past decade of just, as everything's deteriorated in the West, I think she has been a beacon of strength, and I just really, I'm grateful to her strength. That's what I really see her as, a real strong leader who gets things done. Her daughter said something like, you're bleeding before you realise she slit your throat, and I think that we need that level of toughness in what's going on, because I do believe the West is at stake, and I think we need people like her to fight for it.
Well, she's a really inspirational figure to be with, and it's very nice to be here today with you for the What's on Stage podcast. I thought we'd start off by talking a bit about The Real Thing, which is the reason that you're at the Old Vic and which marks your return to the stage. In it, you play one of the cleverest characters in comedy, really, and I wondered what it was like playing Henry, a man who, speaks like like an encyclopedia, really, doesn't he?
Yeah. Well, it's been an absolute joy. I've never done my first Tom Stoppard play, and I've always been a fan, and I've spoken to him a couple of times. He's come to see plays that I've been in, and it really came out of the blue. Like, often, you kind of know what you're doing, or there's a plan, or there's a conversation that goes on. In my experience, there's been conversations that go on for at least 2 years, and there's a slight dance with as you build up. This was really out of the blue. I'd never met Max before, and
Max Webster, his director,
and so it wasn't it wasn't a plan, it wasn't in the offing, and then it just came out of the blue, and I thought I have to do this, and it is one of those moments. You often hear actors be coy and I couldn't possibly, but there genuinely is a push and pull. One part of you is like, oh my god, I have got to play Henry, the real thing. I can't believe I'm being asked to do it. And then the other side is like, why me? You're making a mistake. Do you mean someone else? How could I possibly do this? And all the pitfalls and danger zones of you particularly playing that part just flash before you, and you realise all the ways it could go wrong. And so just take a moment to figure out I don't know, I can't speak for everyone else, but I take a moment to try and figure out my path to being able to do it in a way that would satisfy me, that I would be able to face Tom Stoppard and be like, this is how I think I can do it,
Yeah. It's interesting,
a route to it. Do you see what I mean?
Because he is a playwright, isn't he, as well? So you always have that sense with The Real Thing, which is such a wonderful play, such a rich play, and funny and incredibly moving as well, I think, because it's essentially about love as much. But it's always an odd thing, because you feel that because the hero, the central figure, is a playwright, that there must be an element of autobiographical writing in that. And you think, how much of it is Stoppard? How much of it is invention?
Yeah.
And was he in the room when you were doing... He
wasn't in the room as much as he would normally be, but we had constant communication with him. And when he saw the show, we had a big stamp of approval from him, which really was my biggest relief, because that's what I was aiming for, and I actually took a lot of pressure off of the press night and critics like yourself, because I was like, you know what, I'm aiming for Tom Stoppard's approval, and that's what I'm gunning for here. And but in terms of you're saying, I'm sure it is autobiographical, and there's a lot of documentation about that and a lot of writing about that. I stayed clear of that because I wanted to take what I got from the text, and then my experience with other playwrights, with the industry in general. There's loads of roots in, having been in the industry for 10 years, I recognise a lot of the chat or a lot of the jibes or everything. So I was taking it more from a fresh perspective rather than think. I didn't see how useful it was to me to think about how autobiographical it was. I was just taking it for what it is.
What it is, and it is.
And I would never pry.
No, and you don't. You're right. You don't really want to know, because it's a work of art, and it's about what it is.
It isn't actually him. I actually think you would get into trouble playing the part if you try to link it up to him too much, you know. I think it's got to be a cocktail of Stoppard and Max's vision and what I bring to it, and who the Annie is, who the cast, you know. This is our version, so I think you've got to give each ingredient its respect, but not too much, not too little. You know,
I was interested when you took it on, because I obviously think you're perfect for every part as a fan, and I could see you as Henry when it was announced, but there was a slight surprise that you were playing this very urbane, sophisticated Londoner, you know, different kind of character. Was that part of what made you feel daunted by doing it?
It's one of the reasons I felt daunted by doing it, and one of the reasons I wanted to run towards it. I know that there is something in me that can be, that I could see myself as that, but also, you know, you can do that. And I've done it on screen a couple of times, but actually you have to do it in front of all the audience that are really those people. Do you see what I mean? Like, you have to try and convince that you're the real McCoy in front of people who are actually like that.
Yeah.
And so that is daunting, but I really felt I had Max and Tom's support, and so I felt like I had to say to myself, I know I can get there, but if I'm supported and if I can have frank and candid conversations, and that's my real engage with directors. I go, can I speak candidly with you? That's like one of the most important things for me, and I really could with Max. And I've never met Max before, and usually I build up a relationship with directors, so this was another leap of faith, I felt. Yeah. And I really I thought I'd go anywhere for Max Webster. Honestly, I really loved working with him. It
is lovely having you back on stage. You've had such success in film and on screen television since we last met. It was 2019, Peer Gynt at the National Theatre. And you've done a lot of stage since then as well, including the play we can't actually say in here, can we? So
I say it, Macbeth.
Okay,
I think it's like Voldemort. I think you cannot give it, it's... maybe that's disrespectful, but I think it's Voldemort. You can't be scared of it.
Yes, good.
You have to say it so much in the play. Do you know what I mean? So I think, what's the point?
Yeah. So that was your last London stage appearance. So first of all, how is it coming back to the stage? Are you enjoying being back?
I am loving being back. It feels like this is what's been missing, and I truly mean that, because it can go by so quickly and you don't even realise. It's been 3.5 years since I've been on stage, and that has went by in a flash. And it's amazing. I always remember Ed Kemp at RADA saying, it is a muscle you've got to flex constantly or else you'll get frightened. And I remember thinking, I don't know, that's where I feel at home. I don't think I'll be frightened. And I tell you, I remember stepping onto the Old Vic stage, and it's the first time I've stepped on that stage and thinking, oh my God, that's a big space, you know. And even that 3.5 year gap has definitely, I was like, right, I need to build back up to this. But once I got going, it really does feel at home. There's just something so immediate about it. And you're dealing with the best writing. You know, like often when you're filming, you're having to sort of sandpaper a lot or do a lot of sewing. What's just so amazing about theatre, or how I feel that you can really build your skill or flex your muscles or learn more, is because you're dealing with better writing, the best writing, and this immediate response from an audience. It takes you out of yourself, and I think in a really good way. It stops you being indulgent. I'm only talking for myself. I can't talk for every actor, but it stops me from being indulgent, because you start to learn what works, what reads. Right. So it's, in a way, it's not what's happening for you isn't important. It's about building your skill to realise what is communicating, what is reading, what is affecting people. And there's just something so immediate in theatre that you can really feel it. It's visceral, and it is it's one of the most exhilarating art forms that you could imagine.
It is why you keep going night after night. I mean, that's what keeps me going there. You don't always get that, but when you do get it, and you do have that sense of all being in a room together and being absolutely immersed in whatever's happening on that stage, it's just such a wonderful thing, and so physical. I mean, I love the fact that actually this version of The Real Thing is so physical. It's quite dancey, and you do a lot of movement in it, which I hadn't seen it before. But also,
Max said, who knew he could dance, and he gave me a full opening dance number for the second half, which was originally in trousers, but I thought to be in Y fronts, and Max compromised with boxers. Right. But I do turn them up every night, so they're getting shorter and shorter as the run goes on.
So by the last night you'll be in your Y front.
They will be. I know. I thought, right, okay, that's a good compromise.
But it is that physicality, because that was the truth about your Macbeth, because that was in the Almeida, very small theatre, which actually in Yale Farber's production gradually filled with water as the play went on. So that by the end, you were wading through water, and the front stalls were, the people sitting in the front were getting wet. And
there was SeaWorld.
It was like SeaWorld.
I suggested we give out Max, but people, a wet zone.
What was it like doing that? Because it was such an intense production with Saoirse Ronan.
Yeah, it was a very intense. It's so funny because I'd always, don't mean I was going into Macbeth lightly, but for me it was only, Macbeth's a 2.5 hour play, so which is, I know ours was longer, but
not in your version.
Exactly, but I'm used to doing like. My minimum's 4 hours, so I was like, oh my God, a little short thing was Macbeth. And I remember Jonathan Kent saying to me, this will hit you like a brick. And I remember being like, it's so funny, because in my head I'd played parts that were, I'd played Peer Gynt or Platonov, which I had to do a lot more work to try and make the plays work, if that makes sense. Like, there's a lot more work you have to do to make. There's a lot more stitching you have to do, because Platonov and Peer Gynt is a formed play, but there's so many people are like, there's so much work you have to do to try and make it move.
Yeah.
And with Platonov, it was so bitty, because we have so many versions, unfinished versions or whatever. So in a way, I kind of thought, well, this play has been tried and tested, and it's a shorter play. Let's go. And I remember Jonathan saying, this will hit you like a brick, and it really, really did. And I would never count myself as a method actor. Like, I don't really know what that means. Maybe you bring yourself, or you bring experiences or whatever, but I never consciously think of what a method is or whatever. But I remember, like, could not been able to sleep towards the end of the run.
Really?
Just could not sleep. And I actually texted her, so being like, I'm up. And she was like, so am I. And I just found it unbelievable. And I don't know if it was because me and Eamon Elliott were getting sick with the water, because like we were rolling about in the water so much towards the end, and I don't know what it was, but it was one of the most intense things I'd ever do, and I didn't see that coming, to be honest with you.
But glad to have done it.
Oh, absolutely, and I thought Yael's version, like what she did with the script, and
it's brilliant.
Yeah, really, and obviously there'll be people that will pearl clutch about stuff like that, but I actually think. Stand back from what I'm about to say, but like I actually think dramaturgically it makes much more sense, and I think it really, really adds certainly to Lady Macbeth's character as a whole, but it really helped the couple story, and it is about a couple that become removed from their community and isolate themselves, and what it allowed, I feel, for Saoirse and I to do is to stay as a couple longer, and there's famously loads of Macbeth and Lady Macbeth that don't get on well in production, and we were tight, and we always have been, and so like that, I felt that was really. I remember an actor saying to me, "Try and keep the marriage alive as long as possible," and I felt what Yael's version did was allow us to stay together, and it's not really until after the banquet scene in our version where they have this long night. I always used to call it the long night of the soul, where. And she moved it so that it's usually, I think we did it so it feels like it's going over one long night, and it's usually a little addendum at the end of the banquet scene, but we made it a whole scene where he just cannot sleep, and they're exhausting each other. And I think anyone who's suffered with anxiety or OCD or would really understand that torment.
Yeah.
Of obviously they haven't committed regicide, but like that's the.
No, I thought it was wonderful what you did, that you did keep that relationship alive, and obviously made Lady Macbeth have more lines and more engagement as the play went on. And that did really bring it to vivid life for me. And I think there is...
To understand her breakdown.
Yes. Because she vanishes too soon. There's
and they
no
come
doubt
back and she's...
In Shakespeare, she vanishes too soon.
Totally. And I think you really... Her witnessing that murder and trying to intervene really, I think, makes sense of her story, so I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, I love that messing around with Shakespeare. I'm all in favour of just making it work for new audiences now. And when we met before, we talked a bit about that introduction to the classics, that sense that wanting to engage with culture and serious culture in that way shouldn't feel off-putting. I mean, it shouldn't feel like, oh God, I've got to do Shakespeare. And I do think certainly when I was growing up, sometimes at school it used to make Shakespeare seem like heavy sledding.
Yeah.
Whereas what you want is for it to be like that production of, visceral, engaging, absolutely, Bolton and Blue, I understand this person kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, you said when we met, and I wanted to talk about it, that how did you get into theatre? How did you engage with culture when you were growing up in Glasgow?
Well, I definitely think my gran was, my mum's mum, my gran, Betty, was always the person I could sort of, well, first of all, it started with, she would look after me a lot of times when my mum or dad were working. And it began because she was always the person I would explore imagination with. So I remember I would make her, guys, I think it's a Scottish thing. I don't know if you guys have it. There's a sort of children's TV show called The Singing Kettle. And it's basically this like band, and they have a teapot with a face on it, and you used to say, spout, handle, lid of metal, what's inside the singing kettle, and you'd open it up and there'd be a song inside and you'd have to sing it, and I think they were married, Scylla and Artie, and I would make my gran do it with me. Sometimes I'd be Artie and sometimes I'd be Scylla, and I'd make her switch the gender roles. See, we were doing it back then, like I'd make them switch whatever we felt like, and she would play Batman with me and Thomas the Tank, and so she was always my go-to for imagination. Then as I got older, and I didn't realise this until I was older, my gran, and she came from Govan, she came from a working class background, and she worked in cones, and she worked in a marshmallow factory, and she, of course, then culture like that was much more accessible. Yeah. And my gran would go every weekend. I mean, they would go and see the great big stars, like Frank Sinatra would go and perform in Glasgow, and my gran would go and see, and my gran knew about No Coward plays, and about, I don't know if she knew so much about Shakespeare, but definitely like plays that I was introduced to through my gran, and then through school, and then through drama school and everything. So she really offered me a route into that world that I definitely wouldn't have without her.
And it is a generational shift, I think. I grew up a bit earlier than you in Manchester, but it was the same thing, that everybody accessed culture in the same way they access football to some extent. So they went to the Halle and they went to Man United, or they went and saw things at the Old Library Theatre and they went to the movies. So they didn't see it as being anything that was separated from them.
Yeah, or not for them.
Yeah. It was just something they could absolutely access. So I also grew up in that kind of world.
We had it with the Citizens Theatre, and people could pay £1 and get in. And I'm sure my friend's mum said they would get like a poker chips and ice cream or something like that. But, and then they were going to see like Greek tragedies and of course there's the want now. We're so culturally like removed in all areas from that, and it's interesting because I just think it is about accessibility. And my mates from home, who none of them are actors or are into that world, so of course they would watch me if I'm on telly or whatever, but the only way they would see plays, I think, really, maybe bar one, is when they come down to see me, which they do, and love the plays, and they're not in the business of flattering me or they would be happy to take the mick out of whatever I'm doing. So it's amazing to see their engagement with the play. And my mate came down to see Angels of America and sat for the full thing, and there is no element of Angels that I thought he would be able to. And he says to this day, it's the greatest visual piece of art he's seen other than Avengers Assemble, other than Avengers Endgame or something like that. And I was like, okay, I'll take it.
There's a lot of talk about that at the moment. There's a lot of kind of anxiety, I think, within arts circles, generally not just theatre circles, that working class kids don't feel that they can access high-end culture in a way. I mean, everybody does feel they can watch Avengers Assemble, but they don't necessarily think...
Have you tried it?
It's long. I have actually watched it. How do you think you solve that? Are there solutions that you would suggest?
I think, obviously I don't know, but obviously more money would help, I think, in the arts. And I think this sounds sort of mercenary, but I think the bigger stars, Hollywood stars or big TV names that we can get into regional theatres, the better. Coldly, I think that is an answer. I think that is a key, and I think Dominic Hill does a really good job in the Citizens. It's a great place to go, and it's going through this whole refurb, and I think the more you can get, like I thought it was amazing when James McAvoy took Cyrano up to Scotland, and I think the more I think I think just where we are at culturally, I think that's a big help.
I think you're right, and I do think you do get a little frisson of excitement when you hear that Kit Harington is doing a play, or I've lost every single famous name in my head.
Well, Saoirse doing Macbeth, yeah.
Can you have Saoirse doing Macbeth?
Yeah.
Or Emma Darcy doing...
or Sarah Snook just doing yeah.
And it's exciting, and it makes those links. But it's also, I wonder...
But we've got to try and get that in to other cities, I think, is the key. You know, it's hard to persuade people to do that. There's not the money there often. I don't know. I don't have the answers. But I just know, I think that... if you get my big blockbuster names, it helps.
And there's no doubt that is what makes it exciting, because, when I talked to my dad about Manchester, he did see Olivier at the library, so there is always that sense of big names do bring people into theatres. And we've talked before a bit about how priorities have slightly shifted. So your grand's generation, my dad's generation, culture was front and centre. And for the post-80s generation, the Thatcherite generation, other things have taken on priorities like owning your own home or different kind of culture building. Do you feel that?
I do feel, if you look at, like, say, something like reality television or social media, we are in somewhere new. But we're not, of course, nothing's new. So, like, I'm sure that, it's more like it's more like the Colosseum now. I feel that we're more bred in circuses than we've ever been, and so and that is different. A gladiatorial fight is different from watching Electra. And I think that we seem to be right in the heart of the Colosseum now. Like, I'm not a snob of culture. I love light entertainment, and I love, I will watch sugary reality TV shows as much as but it feels like it is the predominant force in culture at the moment, and you just, everything shifts, and I think we're speaking about Nancy Pelosi, we're in this bizarre decade where, like, actually our whole culture is at stake. I mean, I know I'm dramatic, but I do think it's true. I think the whole Western culture is up for grabs at the moment, and we're a quarter of the way through the century, and I'm pretty desperate for it to be an American century, and I think the next few years will determine who the century is going to belong to, and I think inevitably where the culture will fall, because I think that is all tied in, if you see what I mean. But the in terms of like that, in terms of like the kind of saturation of reality TV show, of social media, like it's really difficult to I think know how to pierce through that, or get someone to come and sit through a full unabridged Shakespeare or whatever, unless you've got a pop culture star. But the trouble is, the pop culture star has to be able to do it.
Yes. No, it's true. It came up last week. So last week's podcast was about the National Theatre's press conference, at which Rufus Norris was asked whether he thought we would be down to 8-minute plays.
Oh, yes.
Because
of TikTok.
Of TikTok.
Yeah.
And, he said no. And obviously that's true at some levels. But the attention span issue, I think, even I find that I'm a fan of the 7-hour play. I loved You and Angels in America. I was very happy to sit there. Tomorrow I'm going to the Almeida, and I will sit there and watch Look Back in Anger and Roots, and have a whole day as a double bill, and have a whole day of theatre. But I do even my attention span, sometimes I'm thinking I'll just have a quick look at X and look at my phone. And of course, the great thing about theatre is, I suppose, you can't look at your phone. I mean, that is the wonderful thing, by and large, though there are.
We had the scene the other night, and there were 4 separate phones went off.
No.
Yeah, I was like... But it tends to be on certain days, I notice. And I don't know. I do think there's swings in culture as well. Like, people might just get sick of all this and then sort of yearn for a more of immersive experience, which I think going into the theatre and escaping for 3 hours or whatever really does give you. And I've been actually amazed at how diverse our audiences have been and how young our audiences have been. And Belle and I were talking, like, when we go out, it's younger people that are coming up to us. There was a couple, I think, in their 20s or 30s, and they were like, we didn't want it to end. And that's what's great about classical work, or how something like Stoppard, will go around forever. What a specialist play, which is actually a very revived play. It happens a lot, and now there's all these discussions of polyamory, that are now the topic of the day, feed right into the themes of this play. So great pieces of work do survive, and no art form dies.
No
art form dies. If it's a true art form.
It keeps having its revivals, doesn't it?
And it's here, and it might go in vogue, and it might be the mode of the day or not the mode of the day. I dare say that theatre is an art form, and perhaps TikTok is not. So I think that it's survived a long time, and I think it will continue. Just if it you can do it financially is the thing. I always think money is a problem, continues to be.
Have you enjoyed, you have done more film work since we last met. I mean, have you enjoyed flexing those muscles as well? I mean, you did Mayor of Easttown with Kate Winslet, and also Ammonite with Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan. I mean, and obviously you've done Sexy Beast, you've done quite a lot of things. How have you found doing that? I
love doing it. And to be honest with you, I really think one informs the other. For me, again, I can only talk personally, but I really learn a lot about stagecraft on film and film work on stage.
What kind of ways?
Well, I think because there's these preconceptions about you have to be smaller on film or bigger on it, but actually the truth is the truth, and you learn what reads and what doesn't read. We used to have an amazing woman come in to teach us at RADA like once a term, and she was an old lady when we met her, so I don't know what age she was, but her name was Elizabeth Percy, and she would come in to teach voice. I always remember she said once, it stuck with me so much. She says, "Oh, darling, they always say, let the camera come to you. Let the camera come to you. That's fine, darling, but when it gets there, what will it find?" And I just will always remember that. I'm like, oh yeah. There's just these little bits, these nuggets that stick with you, and
that's a particularly brilliant.
I know. And what will it find? But I think that's true of theatre as well.
Yeah.
You could be. The truth is the truth. Like, for example, in this play, I can only keep talking about this play because it's what I'm doing right now. There's a scene where it's almost farcical. I've got the cricket bat and I'm leaping about and it's really big and blah, blah, blah. And then there's a bit where I'm on the couch and I'm literally talking like the way we're talking now. Mm. And both are true to what the text demands. So it actually doesn't matter what you can do. And I found myself getting bolder on film where the camera can take the truth. If that makes sense.
Yeah, you said you'd learnt masses from working with Kate Winslet.
Oh yeah. She that and her professionalism, like she is. One might think, we all have misconceptions and everything. But one would think maybe someone at that level, or I have worked with people at those levels where I think, oh my God, they're just on a holiday. Not Kate Winslet. She is one of the hardest working people I have ever met, and what I find amazing is, it's just a multi-Oscar nominated actress, an A-list movie star who can do what she wants, blah, blah, blah. And the passion and the interrogation that she brings to every single scene is really, really invigorating, inspiring, and a good thing to work towards. I've definitely been able to, as you grow up in the industry, there are examples of what not to do, of what not to become, and examples of what to aspire towards. Yeah. And I find it really useful for me to have both quite clearly in my head. Be careful of this, aim for this, avoid that, go towards that. In a way to keep growing as an artist and as a human, to keep your integrity as a person and as an actor.
What's so extraordinary about both your leading ladies, actually, I mean, both Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan, is, they are multi-Oscar nominated and winning actresses, but they have both got that absolute honesty on a screen. I think that both of them, I watch with such admiration of thinking that, they're so willing to be naked almost, naked emotionally.
We're all naked in Ammonite.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. That is true. Wasn't going to go there, but it's true. But yeah, so it is that. It's just an extraordinary quality, isn't it? Of working hard to make yourself so truthful. On a screen.
To be vulnerable enough to do that, and they have that in bags and have senses of humour. in their performances as well as real life, you know, and I think that is, I sort of can't forgive actors that aren't funny. It's my real pet hate. Like, I can't bear unfunny actors. Like, I just cannot bear an unfunny performance. Like, I really, really, really think every performance should have laughs in it. Like, I really, really do. And even if it's the most serious subject.
Right.
I was determined. I got one laugh in Macbeth, and I was determined to get it, because it's not a part you can get many laughs in. And I got it, but it was a tough fight to have. And the reason I can't bear it is because I think, like, what we were talking about, being in the room and being visceral, is if you can make people laugh, then you're immediately empathising with that person, and so you understand them, there's a connection, and when you do need to take them to the more vulnerable places, you know how to do it. And really, for me, that is my experience of real life. The darkest moments I've had in my life have had humour laced through them. There's often the most ludicrous or farcical moments, or the most painful, or, you know, there's so for me, I'm just really interested in that, and it's what I respond to when I want to act in something, and when I'm watching performances that I really admire, and Saoirse and Kate have them in abundance. I just really, really...
And we were talking a bit earlier about Maggie Smith, and you know, whose theatre we are sitting in. You know, she gave so many of her greatest performances here, and that was so much true of her, wasn't it? That through the humour, you absolutely had the empathy and the sadness.
Totally.
Really.
I just watched Gosford Park last night. It's one of my favourite performances of hers, and it's so interesting because it's not, the character's not the protagonist. I know it's an ensemble piece, there's not many true protagonists, but she's one of the characters in it who actually doesn't have a strong narrative arc, which you would think a leading actor would aim towards. She is sort of there to, like, add funny lines, and she's, you know, the character's vital. It's a vile character, and I just was watching her thinking, it's incredible. I'm not invested in the narrative, and I am glued by you. You don't have a strong arc, and I am glued to you, and how vile, how monstrous you are, how much pain you have, how funny you are, how much empathy you. And I'm not an aristocratic lady. Maybe I am inside, but, like, not, you know, like, I'm not, and I empathise with what she's doing so much, because she's doing something universal, and it's just so funny and so sad and painful at the same time.
So
Like, that's the thing I love to try and get towards, is those bittersweet moments that I think she had in abundance.
She did. And you got your own first leading role in a film coming up.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's called Four Mothers, so it premieres at the London Film Festival on the 13th of October. And it's basically about a novelist called Edward, who is Irish, and he has had this novel come out some years ago, and it's not done that well, and he has found himself not writing a second one, and he's found himself living with his mum, who has had a stroke, and having to be her carer in a suburb in Ireland. And his book gets this renaissance on Twitter, and the New York Times re-review it, and it becomes this huge deal, and he then is faced with going and doing this big book tour and going towards his destiny, and at the same time his three friends go to a pride event in Tenerife, I think, and they abandon their three mums with him, and he is left with trying to decide whether to put his mum into a care home to go to do his book tour or not. And he has this long weekend with these four women in their 80s, and it's well, actually exactly what we're talking about. It's, I think, very funny and really sad as well at the same time. So we'll see how it goes. It's an unusual film, but the script I devoured the script in one go. I also think it's a real sign, and it's written by Colin Thornton and Darren Thornton directs it, and they're the brothers, and they did a film called A Date for Mad Mary, which is was one of my favourite films before, and it's this sort of gem, this independent gem that was a big critical hit, and this is their second feature.
I love the idea of you and four octogenarians as well. I'm all in favour of
yeah, me too.
Older actors. Cars.
It was phenomenal. And the woman that plays mum was Fionnuala Flanagan, and we had Dervla Malloy as well in it, who was just phenomenal. And yeah, I was happy. It was me for 3 months in Ireland with these four women with great stories to tell.
Sounds brilliant.
So it was really good. And then this TV series I've got coming out at the end of the year is with me and James Norton and Jessica Brown Finlay and Niamh Algar, and me and Jess are married and Niamh and James are married, and our babies have been swapped at birth, and then we find out so we're basically raising their children, their child, they're raising ours, and it's sort of what you do in the aftermath. And that was directed by Kate Hewitt, great theatre director who then went on and directed One Day and is now and I just loved working with her. She was phenomenal. I've done that a few times, worked with theatre directors on, like Josie Rourke. I've never worked with Josie on stage. No, I've only worked with her on film, and the same with Kate. So, but I love that because there's a vocabulary there that is it's almost like a shorthand,
So thank you so much, James, for talking to us. It will be lovely to see you on film, and also it's been such a thrill to see you on stage again. And that's it for this week's instalment of the What's on Stage podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and send us any questions or anything you want answered. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Talk to us on this What's on Stage podcast.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.